and welcome back to the Dugout. Really appreciate you coming back to see the second part of the Mutt interview. This is Mutt from Muntjac, and in this interview, you're going to hear a continuation of what we had before. A little bit of an abrupt ending, but within this interview, Mutt says that the Muntjac magazine is not out yet. Guess what? Winter 24, Community Self-Defense Against Fascism in the State, Muntjac, issue 1, is now out, and you can find that at muntjacmag.noblogs.org. Link will be in the description, but you can also find that at muntjacmag.noblogs.org. Really excited for y'all to get into this episode. This was an amazing connection for the Dugout, and I can't wait for y'all to find out what exactly I mean by that. See y'all soon.
Yeah, they hate the black people. They see it, just act like cops. And when they're not at protests, they are cops. They stand at train stations and ask people what they're doing, where they're going. They liaise with the police as well. It's pretty bad. There's also professional activist problem. There's professional inverted commas activists who will have the megaphone and lead the demonstration, and they'll say shit to us oh no, don't get aggy with the cops. Remember who we're here for. It's not for them. It's for the family whoever's just been murdered by the police or whatever. We're here to do whatever they say. Although they aren't saying it, for the record. Recently, the murder of Chris Carver, a black man who was shot by British armed police, did an appeal on the police officer, how he hadn't been charged with murder the first time. The appeal finished the other day, and it was not guilty again. So there's a demonstration outside the court, and these same professional activists were telling people, hey, don't chant "fuck the police." Don't say that. This is a family event. And it's, during George Floyd, British BLM was saying to women at demonstrations, you can't chant "stop killing the gal dem." This is about a man. It's the intersections between the politics of safety, politics of acceptability, and the patriarchy, and how tightly they're wound together. The same people who are twitchy about people getting violent are the same people who are oh, we can't confront the sexism in our own social movements because that would hurt people's feelings. It's the same Venn diagram. Whole thing really informs my politics of insurrectionary anarchism, and it's why I'm very keen on a consistent critique of these organizations, because so often they'll create these people who become celebrities, and I hate it. I really hate it, because these same academics will take government money to get or grants to do their thing, and then there'll be the same people who during the race riots here a few months ago were don't go outside, guys, stay at home. If you see anyone, call the police. But the Muslim community here were primarily targeted during the race riots here. And I want to use Gord Hill's term here, the Gord Hill, the Queequeg indigenous anarchists from so-called Canada, alders rather than elders. They were saying to the young lads in the Muslim community, don't go outside to the protest or I'll tell your parents. These are moms, they were saying it. And it's because the same people who don't want there to be a revolution, because they're invested in capitalism, because they're invested in the patriarchy. They see this when there's a chance for the youth to take to the streets and take on fascists in real life. For the first massive mobilization of fascists in this country for a long time, they were oh no, stay at home, don't tell anybody, don't just call the police so we can get funding. And it's in Brixton, to illustrate this, in 1983, police shooting of Sherry Gross, black woman in a home who was raided by the police and then shot, which paralyzed her. Black people gathered outside Brixton police station. Black women were cussing the police out. Black men were cussing the police out. And the police brought out a black priest. And the police were saying on the megaphone, listen, this is your leader. As this guy goes to speak, the Molotovs start flying. And that's my exact point. Time and time again, the police want to find our leader. I say our, because there is no one black politic. There is no one black community. There are dozens, and we intersect, an insurrectionary politics, a black anarchist politics for me, has to take on some necessary critique of the activist movement and the anarchists. We could do better than this.
Have you read Politics of Innocence by Jackie Wang?
Yes. Oh my, Jackie Wang, one of my favorite authors. Jackie Wang's critique, it's foundational to my own. A lot of people would benefit from reading that, or at least an extract from it. Part of my research into the group at APOC, I found out Jackie was actually making a documentary about the group, but it never came out, which is a massive shame. So Jackie was either actually a member of APOC or was close to them or whatever. But I think that being fundamental to an anarchist person of color approach to anarchism, people who are internally marginalized inside social movements tend to have the best opinion. The woman in the Black Panther Party, right? That's a great example.
Yeah.
Women in the Panthers, the queer members of the BLA, like Kwesi Balagoon. There's no coincidence that they have better takes than their male or their socially dominant counterparts. They experience the oppression twofold, threefold, whatever, what have you. And it's really important we center those voices, which is why I, using the power of Twitter, started Muntjac, because it's something that's lacked here for so long. Unfortunately, we've kind of slacked on getting the first issue of the Action magazine out. I don't even know what's going to be out, but we'll get it. I promise.
Let me know if you need any writers from across the pond.
Oh yeah, like it's small. We got people like write in from like Nigeria and the US. It's based in Britain, but like anyone who's not white can send stuff in. There isn't one anymore. There was groups like APOC who had the platform for that, but they're gone. And RAM is gone as well. And who else was there? The Abolitionists, Our Futures of the Americas. I think they're gone now. I think they're going.
Yeah, low key. Yeah, they haven't posted shit
since the whole thing with it. Yeah. So it's important that like even if this Muntjac thing's temporary, we try and make something. I also love to mention this. Muntjac, the symbol's like a deer. The Muntjac deer is like a real deer, but they're actually from Indonesia. And some rich dude brought them here and they all escaped, which is a really funny parallel for what we are. Like a lot of us are colonial subjects. Like I'm Barbadian. A lot of us are from like former British territories overseas, and we were brought here, or our ancestors were brought here to do work at reduced pay. And a lot of us, well, at least in Muntjac, as a politic, we escaped this like secondary plantation, this like internal oppression of like our peers who are our employers. Like, for example, I'm not sure how much you will know about British political blackness as a concept. In the Black Power movement here in the 70s and 60s, it included South Asian people. There was groups like the Indian Workers Association, the IWA, and they were employers. So it was a trade union and a civil rights group who were factory owners a lot of the time. And so people would, travel to the UK and work under like a radical employer who would still pay them less than they actually deserved and would still exploit them, which is where the Asian youth movement came. So the second generation immigrants in that community took on a more direct action focused and a more street focused politics. And because of that, they were marginalized by their own community. They were oppressed very heavily. There's several campaigns after mass arrests of South Asian radicals. And a lot of us look at the Asian youth movement, we can see a parallel to what's occurring. Even more ironically, a lot of the guys who are still alive, the Asian youth movement, are now like Trotskyists, which is really weird. But like, it's always a bit odd. I think there is a legacy here of people who are internally marginalized in the left or the anarchists or whatever. We've experienced it. Like we've seen something, so we know something, And I think recognizing that less is like, oh, now what do we do? More as in we have a strategy. So I can be quite a negative person in how I talk. I do think there is like a utility in the bullshit we put up with or used to put up with, because now we have the tools. We just have to be determined.
I mean, it's honestly why I titled my book When They Tell You to Be Good, and like the whole politics of innocence thing, because I do think there are certain lives that people are born into where you just are aware of the way that the state can fuck you up and the way that racism and violence and imperialism exists. Then there are also modes of existence where you confront those things and you commit to a certain course of action that wants to be insurrectionary or antagonistic. But I feel like where the politics of innocence thing comes through for me, I need to have a sustained commitment to turning away from this idea that I need to be innocent. And innocent in the sense of like, we're going to get to this better world and I won't have done anything that involves violence or illegality. That to me is so basic and it's so foundational, but so many people don't even get there. And then so many people don't even figure out what their strategy or tactic is of antagonism like afterwards. Yeah, I just find the politics of innocence thing so necessary. And then kind of to your point, doing the work in a way that helps you find other people and like you can build that community and like, I don't know, find the other people that kind of align with a certain kind of antagonistic or insurrectionary kind of praxis, which I think is really important. But yeah, honestly, now that I think about it, I'm like, that's why I named my book.
Shout out Jackie Wang, like one of the greatest. I think as well, like people in Muntjac, I obviously don't want to deny I'm talking on their behalf. Like they are like a very diverse group of like politics. Like not all of us would probably even align with the term like insurrectionary anarchism. Or some people had their own thing. Anarchita, like the politics of groups, abolition futures, is quite big. Amongst black anarchists, they're quite big here. There was an attempt to start an anarchita group here, but it was like kind of dead in the water really early on. Those politics are very appealing for a lot of black radicals, just because of its like you say, insurrectionary politics refusal. politics of anti-innocence, politics of like life-affirming levels of negation, where your way you live, the way you move, gives you access to resources. Like there's a really good zine by a group called Abolitionists and Futures of the Americas. It's called Black is Crime. It's in the Reader, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And it talks about how illegalism is life-affirming and how like looking at things outside and against the rule of law is an integral part of the Black radical politic. Because like you say, like it's almost like innate to anyone take their position as like colonized subjects in the US or post-colonial subjects in the UK. We are looking at like the plantation. We can either, get to it and grind to become like the aspirational Black capitalist or the aspirational, Southeast or Southeast Asian capitalist, or we can refuse it and we can join our peers who hate this shithole and want to tear it down. We can join that. Another Gord Hill ism I'm using here, without making ourselves subordinate to the pre-existing anarchist movement or making them subordinate to us. We can carve out our own space against the state, And no, that's the thing for me. Like it's a very positive affirmation. Like I always, I guess my politics, you could describe it a bit along the lines of like anarchist nihilism. I'm very influenced by groups like 325, who were like anarchist nihilist, anti-psychiatrists, like insurrectionary anarchists that were around for a couple of years till they got repressed. I think for me, looking at it in a quasi-positive way helps you rationalize it, because for a lot of people I know, they can do the thing of like, oh, we're fucked, there's nothing in this political system that wants to help us at all, let's just lay down and die. And like it's the opposite for that for me. Like I want to live, and the way I'm going to live, the prodigy, if I'm gonna live illegal. It's the whole thing, me choosing a lifestyle that puts me at odds with society in general, whether it be Black British simulation society or white society at large. Good. Like bring it. Like
or what potentials or current possibilities or influence do you see of like this Black autonomous, Black revolutionary, anarchata, mad liberation, anti-psychiatry work in specifically abolitionist scenes? Because I mean, that's something we've been seeing a lot more here, at least as like an open conversation of folks, and like being able to have space for that in our communities to continue talking about them and then naming them in that violence. How's that going over there?
So the British abolitionist movement, deeply inspired by the movement in the US, obviously where it gets its namesake from, where it gets all its politics from. And yeah, like it's definitely growing in the sense that a lot of people, ever since the collapse of the sort of cult around Jeremy Corbyn, the sort of left-wing politician who disappeared off the radar because he got kicked out of his own party, people have more and more sought something that isn't going to wait for the next Corbyn, that isn't going to create the next Corbyn, but it's going to reject the conditions that created him. It's going to reject like broad left milieu and instead have a specific politics, like you say, specifically calling it out: anti-psychiatry, anti-work, anti-state. For me, that's taking shape. It's largely in London, Manchester, and Bristol, the sort of bigger like activist-y cities, but also elsewhere in like Newcastle, Nottingham, parts of Scotland, parts of Wales, Cornwall, where there's quite a complicated Cornish nationalism thing, but that's quite marginal also, especially in communities that people typically wouldn't see in a more stereotypical part of the left. There's actually like quite radical small groups of Muslim women in this country who, during the race riots, creating informal like networks that didn't involve the police, but to keep people in contact with one another in their neighborhood, prevent them from like getting targeted by like mobs of racists or cops, and deliberately saying, we're not calling the police, we're calling each other. And these things I'm only seeing in an abstract sense on the surface level, but this is obviously prefigurative work that's existed for a long time. This country's got a huge legacy of radical squatting. Squatting here is ostensibly legal in commercial properties like businesses or old train stations or police stations. And the squatters, while not always being political, there's a huge potential there. There's like 60,000 unused buildings, some crazy number of unused buildings. And people with the time and the energy can go crack places and stay in them for months at a time. A radical like embracing of that for the rest of the radical scene outside of just the white anarchist is important. And there is examples of that. Groups like Sisters Uncut, who are like a radical abolitionist feminist group. They squatted for a bit. There was obviously the aforementioned Black Squatters Collective, who used to be called the House of Shango. They're still around. There's not online anymore. There's the whole temporary thing, and the white anarchists didn't like them too much. Anti-psychiatry is quite big amongst like abolitionists. They recognize the psychiatric system here because of its legacy in its colonial usage in the US, legacy in the British colonies of being used against rebels and against rebels here. and against women here specifically. There is an abolitionist politics around psychiatry and a rejection of it, which is great. But it is quite small, quite marginal. A lot of people who were involved in it are like people in the psychiatric system, so they have less capacity to go out and organize because they're in a prison. You know, it's a psych ward is a prison. People who are mentally unwell. Yeah, there's also really good stuff in the schools with groups like No More Exclusion. A lot of black youth here, specifically black youth, get kicked out of school very young. They're arrested, they're searched, they're strip searched by the police very frequently. Cops can say they smell weed on you. They can strip search children here. It's nasty. And because of that, like there's abolitionist groups who go into the schools, coalitions of students and teachers, while being small and being marginal, and often being centered around one case or two cases. It's out there. And I think this politics is as much as it's often not in contact with one another, it's growing. I think there's also, which I think you'll all quite like, a return of, because of the economy crashing recently, there's a return to like British black radical house, dub, and ska parties. It's coming back.
Really?
Yeah, it's back because no one can afford the club anymore. No one can afford
We need to make a visit. We need to make a visit.
There is like radical collectives here who will put on like Black Power nights in someone's house, text the address, and they have like an open mic. It's real. And as much as it is like you say, it's a party, but people you meet at these parties are the ones you go to the demo with next week. As much as it seems, some people say, "Oh, it's frivolous, it's a party, it's to do drugs." No, it's prefigurative work. You know, it's like the first step in creating affinities that will last and relationships that matter, creating dangerous like spaces for our enemies, the cops. You know, like, and I think there is like you can't see me right now. I'm smiling ear to ear just talking about this. There is so much great stuff happening. It's just underreported because I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking to the anarchists or to the Marxists. Well, I completely see why the Marxists are like a bit too weird. But I want Muntjac to be a thing people can just write into. We've had it a few times already. People just said like, "Oh, after the Notting Hill Carnival," which I'm sure you all know was created after the murder of a black man and put on by 3 black communists from Britain. Not 2 from Britain, 1 from the US. But she was like deported to the US for Black Power activity stuff. Notting Hill Carnival also had out the murder of Kelso Coltrane, and it was originally like an indoor carnival for the Caribbean community to protect themselves, which is sort of demonstrate. It was more to bring them all together after a murder, but year after year, these parties got bigger and bigger, and they eventually had to resist the police attacking them and then resist the fascists attacking them. The parties got so big, no one could stop them. Where unfortunately now the parties are so big that the government has just agreed to let them happen, and they help organize them. But against this is an internal, like, insurrectionary current in the parties that this year that they put on an illegal rave at the end of the carnival parties called Carney Afters, and they use the money from people donated to give money to anti-fascists who were arrested during the riots. So it's the whole thing. Like it's out there, but that wasn't in the news. You know, that wasn't in the news. That didn't make it outside of like the anarchist scene. And I didn't know that until I got it emailed to me.
That's interesting. There's a community fest, Central Ohio, and in the 80s, it was like solely radicals. It was an illegal event. They would set up in one of the biggest parks and they would just take it over. And now it's like the cops are doing security. There have been like organized white militants who are doing the security, and it's like a whole licensed, regulated event now. And there's like talk to take it over because all the people, all like the not radical people that stayed to run it and stayed in the city are all like 80 now. And it's like, you can take it over. Kick out the cops.
That's the goal. Like time and time again, it's always against the police. There's a really great French chant, which is just that. Yeah, all of us hate the police. Tout le monde déteste la police. Yeah, it's
remember that one.
It's one of the few non-English chants that actually flies here. Like, if you try like siamo tutti antifascisti in this country, everyone's like, "Huh? What do you mean?" Like, Claudia Jones.
Oh, okay, Claudia Jones. Yeah.
Claudia Jones. When she came here, she helped put on Notting Hill Carnival. Show the connection between the Black Power movement in the US and the UK. It's people who got deported here. Another example is like the reader I created, Black Summer Reader. Like, it's dedicated to my grandmother, Udine McConney. She is a Wimmish immigrant. She came here in the 60s. She fought against the like internal like racism within groups like the WI and the Communist Party. She was a communist, and that's the thing. Like, I think it's in my blood to want to get involved in these things and not only make them, inverted commas, like more inclusive, but also to make them more dangerous. You know, like she challenged the WI on complicity with the sterilization of South Asian women when they came here. That was a big thing in the 70s. And she challenged the WI on institutional racism in the community and the police. She used to help run the Caribbean Club in my hometown, which closed a couple of years ago. I hate using this sort of term because I always feel like I'm being a bit too flowery with my language. We kind of owe it people who got us here to do something to get rid of this fucking system. Like, because our ancestors like came here or were forced here to work and do atrocious work to give us a life, but we have the opportunity to destroy the system completely. That's where I kind of draw back to the ancestors. I want to do them a good service by carrying on what they are up to, even if it does look very different to like going to meetings. I hate meeting.
If you're listening to this, you'll really enjoy the stuff that we got going on over on our Patreon. For just $5 a month, you can get some exclusive content, such as exclusive readings, exclusive episodes, and just a community that's down and willing to talk to each other. If this sounds like your kind of vibe, head over to patreon.com/the Dugout Pod, and we'll see you over there.
A few years ago, I went on this trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there was like Black Wall Street, and it was destroyed, and there was race riots. And basically, I met this preacher who was like a Black liberation theologist, and he was just basically saying, like, when we were on the slave ships and they were taking us over here, like the ultimate emancipation for the slave was death, essentially. And I think about how since these systems have only reformed and they're violent, and we're still kind of like, I don't know, fighting the same series of structural evils as they innovate themselves. I think you saying what you said reminds me of people in the US who are Black say like, we're not our ancestors, or like the people that go on like slave plantations and they're like the Black doctors in their lab coats and they're like, look how far we've come. Like I think about like Black and like colonial struggles and like Caribbean like decolonial struggles. I think about how the fact that we're even here is like based on a series of improbabilities based on the fact that people fought in the past without even knowing that anything would get better. And so to your point, I'm just like, how could I not be invested in this history or try to hold space? And I feel like that's what I feel in like you gathering people together and gathering these resources and kind of like being a space for people to kind of like congregate. Like that's important because it's like this history is erased otherwise. Like there's no recollection of it. Even you mentioning like your grandmother now, like not everyone fucking talks to their grandmother and is able to like understand the work that they did in ways that they could say and ways that you understand too. And I feel like that is also like very life-giving work, which is needed.
But in the introduction of the reader, I mentioned how like Black autonomous politics specifically is a distinctly oral tradition. Like as much as there are zines and books written by Black anarchists and like there's famous zines like Lorenz Kimboa Urban's work, which is really just like 7 zines glued together, Ashanti Alston's various lectures, which become zines, like it's largely like an oral thing. When I met a group of like Black radical squatters in London, they'd never heard of like Kwesi Balagoon, Lorenz Kimboa Urban, Janina Irvin. They'd never heard of these people, and it's one of those things where they're already doing it, but they've never even read the theory. And that's the thing. Our politics comes from our experience. I hate to say the word natural, but it comes from like an obvious solution to being included from the political process, to being included from the social process, to being included from the like hierarchies of British or settler or capitalism. The solution is an autonomous politics that refuses these things completely. And even if you've never met an anarchist or even spoken to someone who identifies as an anarchist, if you're switched on and don't fall for one of the millions of traps that are out there, like conspiracy theories or Hotep bullshit or like patriarchal bullshit or the really, really fucking awful Black capitalist projects, the millions of them, like Black wealth thing, if you don't fall for that and you can recognize this pattern that all of our ancestors have had to put up with in these countries we've been forced into, the solution is anarchism. Like it really is. Like if you look at anything and you think of like a real serious critique of the Black Power movement, the thing that they lack was a critique of authority and a critique of patriarchy. Your conversation with McKeeble talking about the famous men of the Black Power movement were often very, very sexist. Like very, very sexist. That bit really struck me. I didn't know much about those men. Eldridge Cleaver, I knew nothing about him, and I was like, wow. In our movements, we can see it. Like members of Muntjac I've spoken to, often for the first time. I've not really known any of them outside of the organization until we'd come across and like started this whole thing and met occasionally in person. We've all seen it, this exact parallel of the social movement, which is like meant to be representations of our grievances, but in turn reproduces the exact same problem. Now, I don't think obviously black anarchists are incapable of doing shit horrible, like wrong to each other. Obviously not true. We all have to check ourselves, check our peers, and be accountable and hold others accountable. And through that, we have to create like not only an oral tradition of respect, but an oral tradition that informs ourselves, the people around us, of how we expect each other to behave. People, like especially in like the squatting scene I've dipped into, it's rough. You know, people who are living in buildings that are abandoned on purpose tend to have been rejected by society in more ways than one. And because of that, we're all damaged and traumatized people, and it's very easy for us to hurt each other. And it's about respect, because like everyone in stories, shit's happened to them that's like fucked them up in the movement, and it scares people off. It's a reason why like we're like, oh, why is it always the same 10 people who turn up everything? Because everybody else is like burnt out. So it's part of the whole deracialization thing as well, where people like get like racist abuse from like, well, incidentally or on purpose occasionally from their like inverted commas peers, get fucked over. You know, like I even had like weird things before where people in other countries are asking to do anti-racism workshops. Like, you know, like anarchists in different countries to me have asked me that. I'm like, I'm not the guy.
We just did this interview with Jonana, and it's like, even black radicals here, we need to organize and then create a black party dupe, and then get confused when they have the same issues.
Oh, yeah.
Like, okay, we just copy and paste it. That really doesn't work.
To your point about groups or different backgrounds being segmented, like on a decolonial level, how Caribbeanness colors or affect how you do work. When I think about the fact my family came to the US and now I'm both an American citizen and tied to this country that had a decolonial struggle. And if I'm invested in what it took for my family's island to get free, like what is the next step or stage? And I feel like there's all these different layers of what is your immigration journey, your nationality. But I think across all of that, there's also the question of, through all of these different forms of immigration and displacement, what is our strategy moving forward on what we're up against, and how can we be militantly in solidarity with each other? I think that's something that, like the US encampment stuff here, some of the failures of the peace policing or caring too much about how the state would respond. To me, it felt like a failed opportunity in that militant solidarity that I think we should all kind of be reaching for.
Yeah, like to go back one paragraph to about Janina, like I love how Janina like said it, that we can't do what they did. We can't create a Black Panther Party. We can't create, although there was a British Black Panther Party at the same time that was like straight up copying the American one word for word a lot of the time, in both ways, both the negative sense and the positive sense. We can't do it again. Like the context is so different. But to go forward to what you were saying, Prince, there is this thing of like, I think a future program of us as the third generation or second generation immigrants, or like naturalized inverted commas citizen, is the rejection of the idea of our citizenship or our position in this society, being revocable. The groups like the Anti-Raids Network, which is this like decentralized, autonomous, like anarchist inspired network of neighborhoods that watch out for immigration raids and watch out for immigration police and reject the idea of people getting deported back to their real country, inverted commas, is an amazing like starting point. The antagonisms around that network, how hated they are by immigration police. Immigration police hate to see them coming because it's not the like black bloc radicals, it's the grandmas in that neighborhood, it's the students in that neighborhood, it's everyone. Like you'll see it if it's on YouTube, it's on Twitter. You can look it up. It's someone
I've
from
heard of this stuff a lot, especially in the UK and British area. I've like heard about and seen, like, I feel like there's a lot of media stuff around it too. Yeah, I mean that's something like we invoked when talking about like this whole like Trump and Project 2025, and they want to denaturalize us and history we can look on. Y'all ready to? Well, we've already been practicing de-arrest, so let's put some of that into some action. But what about like, what does that look like at a community level?
Yeah.
And it's not just like, let's just go grab all your hard ass friends and y'all are going to like have a texting network, and then someone will call you and then you're going to go protect people. It's like, oh no, there's like already.
Yes. Like I literally think about the fact that most of my uncles were undocumented and here illegally, like my family had to learn how to fucking have people around that didn't want to be documented or tracked. Yeah, how do you tap into already living histories of resistance there that are at play? I really agree with your point about there being this new frontier about rejecting citizenship or statehood or whatever it may be. Like one organization here that I really admire in the US is No More Deaths, and they go to the border and they do water drop-offs and they help with supplies at certain kinds of camps. And I feel like that area or level of intervention to me is the only likely next step because the alternative is participation, which I'm just kind of like, I get why my family came here, but doesn't mean that I got to buy into, I don't know, whatever I'm being sold that this is.
We do see groups like No More Deaths. We see that and we're like, oh, that's a great, because like here, obviously, like the refugees here die in the ocean. There's a really massive, like, horrible case where people died in the back of a refrigerated truck coming to the UK. That's the thing. Like expanding it beyond just the neighborhood and taking it on an international sense, taking it out to the refugee camps in Calais, people come over to the UK from, taking it out to North Africa. People often depart to get here. That's the future, the long-term strategy. The rejection of recognizing European borders as like anything legitimate or worth protecting. There's a really good slogan. So in the 70s, the Asian Youth Movement, who were the sort of radical wing of the South Asian radical movement, their slogan was "Here to stay, here to fight," which I really fucking love, because like they didn't see Britishness or being in Britain or whatever as an appealing thing. They saw that they're here, and while they're here, they're going to fight for it. There's so much. I could the entire day telling you about like all the assimilationist nonsense that we've all like talked about to each other. Some of us immediate ancestors was literally saying like, if I'm going to be living in this country, if I get racists giving me problems, I'm gonna fight them. And that's that. Yeah. If the British state comes after us, like, because the slogan is like, when allies are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back, and it's this rejection of business as usual. Following the like murder of Mark Duggan in 2011 in August, there was a vigil in London, and a young black girl threw stones at the police, and the police came over and battered her with truncheons. And following that, it was the outbreak of Britain's biggest ever series of riots that crossed the entire country, from the entire England, from the south of England to the north, like millions of pounds of damages, 5,000 arrests, like a massive insurrection. And that's the thing. It's the recognition that any poor person, whether it be a Romani person, it would be a South Asian, East Asian, a Southeast Asian, or Black person, we have to recognize that they can kill one of us. They could kill any of us. And the real like consequences and real holding them accountable, them being the state, is taking on their world and trashing it. As much as it sounds me being a bit like, is that all you got to offer? That's the best shit we can be doing. Like when this stuff happened, is refusing the idea of like static A to B broad daylight Saturday morning demonstration, rejecting group statements we all like sign or chant along to.
My friend was telling me about there were protests in Chicago not too long ago. I think it was related to like the U.S. encampment Palestine movement. And like there was so much peace policing that there was this park that people were marching near, and like the fucking peace police marshals or whatever were trying to get everyone to chant out of the streets and into the park.
Oh my god. I'm like, oh my god.
Fell far. We fell far.
And that's the thing, like, as anarchists, especially like black and racialized anarchists, our challenge is confronting this. The challenge is presenting our politics in a way that can't be peace policed, in having movements that don't happen at broad daylight with marshals. The Palestine Solidarity Movement here, every single week, it's the largest demonstration in British history, over and over again. But there's no property damage. The Israeli embassy doesn't even get approached, but there's several arrests every single time. The groups like the Palestine Solidarity Campaign help people get arrested. There's a really horrible example of like a very easy de-arrest of like a lone cop grabbing someone, and these PSC marshals became like human starfishes. They put their arms out and their legs out so no one could grab this kid getting arrested. For our politics to be serious, we have to reject business as usual politics of these paid organizers, these paid union officials. We have to like confront it, and we have to have a real conversation about like what utility these movements have. The most ironic thing I saw recently was like to show an example of the cross-class nature of a lot of these like solidarity campaigns run by like ostensibly Trotskyist political parties. Because here, for the record, the big tankies here are Trots, not MLs. Just the record. Unlike the US, where it's the opposite, and Trots are like the weird outsider guy. There was a Palestine Solidarity gallery exhibit, which is really cool. Like, learning about Palestinian culture isn't learning about just their oppression. It's about their art, about their music, about their culture, about their food. But it was sponsored by a letting agent. It was sponsored by a private security company. Oh. And it's this whole, it's this cross-class thing we have to really, really critique, because like if we allow people who claim to be our representatives in like the organizing space doing blatant cross-class stuff, it'll just be more counterinsurgency. And it's exactly why these demonstrations, might be the biggest ones in British history, don't do anything. It's the exact same reason.
What is your approach to engaging in movement spaces where it's like there's all these different ideas about how we engage with the state? Like, I guess what kind of solutions have you been exploring with folks that I know? We've been thinking a lot about reading more into like radical threat modeling and how like affinity groups can think about that, or a lot of the US encampment stuff here that I experience. For me, on a decolonial level, I'm engaging in struggles that it's not like I'm trying to police what other people should think decolonial is, but in the least, I'm like, maybe I don't help or work with people as directly if they are anti-state or something, or like anti-police, because I feel like even having that distinction when I'm working with other people of color or people that have experienced colonization, I'm like, that to me seems like a line that I could like try to establish and work with, as opposed to just being like, oh, they're up against like similar forms of violence. But I feel like it's the question of the violence that people are up against and also what they're willing to do to overcome that, what their relationship with the state is. Will they hand people they're working with over? I don't know. I just feel like for me, it's something I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good, it's like I say, a really difficult one, but I'll try and give you some answers. For my answers to like who I want to work with, like this is what you're saying about security culture. For me, I love Jay Sakai's point of good politics is good security culture. Anybody who's a big fan of the state, whether it be the British state, the Iranian state, the American state, whatever, I'm not going to trust them with anything. like I don't trust people who like are like fans of state apparatuses, even if it's in like an abstract sense. An Estonian nationalist, well, even then that'd be kind of strange. Like I just don't want anything to do with it. Security culture, politics is the best measure of security culture. Like someone who seems legit and then in a casual sense is like sexist in how they talk about women. There's a great zine about this called "Why Misogynists Make Great Informants." People who are like transphobic, if they're okay with this kind of oppression of trans people, of neurodivergent people, of the disabled, whatever it is, they're going to have a deeper, worse politics. They're going to have a more fickle, easy to abandon politics that isn't all encompassing. So good politics is good security. And I guess like for long-term militancy, there's a great Janina Irvin piece from an interview in a magazine called Propter Nost, which is by Sedition Press. Janina talks about like specifically in the context of anti-fascism has to go beyond an event-based politics. It can't just be a thing we do at the occupation. It can't be a thing we just do.
That's what she was talking to us about.
Yeah, exactly. Like it has to be talking about the survival issues, and that for me is a big thing. There's anarchist groups here who have squatted illegal like community gardens and stuff. Like there is little tiny things like that, and it's talking about like especially with climate change, like habitat loss, ever rising sea temperatures, and the complete destruction of our environment because of capitalism. We have to be thinking about how we're going to survive, not just in like a hypothetical climate collapse scenario, but like literally tomorrow.
Casey Goonan popped up over the pond. People talking about their case at all?
Unfortunately, no, I've not heard about Casey Goonan.
Goonan is facing federal prison time for allegedly firebombing 3 cop cars in solidarity with the Bay Area encampments and the Operation Campus Flood. And they're being held, not even talking about Casey. And it's the same area where the shit was going on. And that's like a part of the counterinsurgency. Like it's those folks who have that closer proximity to the state, maybe even newer or not newer into like doing direct action. I mean, it was crazy, like a whole wave of direct action around the US, be there to be there. And I think that's why like a lot of anarchists threw themselves in the scene to be like, oh shit, I'm working with somebody who will literally negotiate me out of the protest if it gives them one demand.
Sort of not exactly the same, but similar thing. Following a demonstration against a proposed, which is now passed, police powers increase in Bristol a few years ago. A bunch of people were arrested. There was a real urge from the anarchists to make sure people who were protesting against the police getting increased powers were supporting people who were arrested at anti-police demonstrations. But like you say, there's people had this thing of like, oh no, I can't waste time supporting these guys who were violent because that would be like, oh, I'm not violent, I'm a pacifist, and it's really fucking irritating.
Their quote unquote leaders get arrested, and it's a free them.
Literally, like, yeah, exactly. People have to realize if they can arrest one of us at a demo for like messing around in some kind of way, they can arrest all of us at demo. Police now target anyone wearing a face mask. They try and isolate you and pick you off if you're wearing a mask. And that's especially during the race riots, they were keen to get everyone demasked. Like they had like designated mask-free zones on like the maps. They print it out on a bit A4. If you're wearing a mask in this area, you can be arrested. That sort of thing. And it's just like, okay, not a big fan of black bloc, are you? In Germany, you can get like a bigger charge having a group of you wearing the same outfit. It's a real thing. The black bloc tactics work so well
Here it's state by state. I mean, there was a whole county that banned surgical masks, which is actually in New York, which was crazy.
Wow.
In Virginia specifically, especially around where like the fight against the Mountain Valley Pipeline was, they implemented an anti-masking law who would only wear surgical masks out in public.
COVID isn't over. People are still dying and getting sick from COVID. Just the government decided that it's like a low enough number for them, they don't care anymore. Our safety, just like our citizenship or our presence here, is only recognized as long as we're behaving. That's the whole thing. People, especially the fucking like liberals. Oh, I don't go to demonstrations, but like I retweet stuff. They don't get it. They come in for you too.
Yeah.
Even if you behave, and they're coming for you too. Like they tell you to be nice or be good. The day they fucking decide, they're like, you know what?
Yeah.
You lot are too fucking loud. You know, it's actually a crime here to get too loud at demonstrations. There's like a specific law of like how many decibels you can make. It's really funny.
There's whole protests that are on universities, and you're like, why are they yelling with no microphone? It's like, oh, as soon as they bring out a megaphone,
they can get arrested. It's similar with like they've banned several of the pro-Palestine chants. Like from the river to the sea is actually illegal to say here. We don't have free speech laws. It's not a thing here. If you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, you can be arrested. It seems like a terrorist slogan.
The fact that that phrase was spray painted in DC is one of the reasons, and the red triangle, that they were like Hamas at the protests, and they're like, there are terrorist sympathizers outside of DC, and Harris said this.
Did you see a few weeks ago at a demonstration in London, a guy was arrested for wearing a sort of like hang glider outfit?
Oh, wow.
So obviously it's a reference to, he got arrested for that. Like imagine like you're wearing a clearly tongue-in-cheek kind of outfit, and then like 10 cops arrest you.
It's like, why couldn't they arrest people that wear like Confederate soldier costumes or something?
Yeah, like
not that I want people to be arrested, but I'm just like,
of course, like abolition. There are way worse things to be wearing, like police uniform. Here, political uniforms are actually a crime. You can't wear political uniforms like, as a rule. British like fascists don't have matching outfits no more. Even the headbands, PFLP, Hamas, Fatah headband, you can get time by wearing a certain item of clothing. You're apparently endorsing a terrorist organization, and it's like you've seen about.
I'm getting in trouble for that here.
How much time can you get?
I'm not sure there's any convictions for like the sort of like Hezbollah, Hamas, Middle Eastern solidarity stuff that they're wearing, but it is like actual time. Either that or like protest bans and fines. There's a group called Palestine Action. Have you heard about Palestine Action?
Yeah.
They're probably on the way to get prescribed being a member of that group or like being associated with that group. You can get like jail for being to do with them.
Yeah.
Because they're doing so. Like, interestingly, their cases in court keep getting thrown out. They kind of do the whole thing of like, I'm a political prisoner. What I've done is for politics. I haven't like killed anybody. I've just smashed a drone factory. Occasionally you are beating it, but it is a case that like it's a matter of time until the government like this is getting really annoying because the judges won't prosecute them.
There's a Pal Action US contingent that actually just kind of unincorporated.
Cool.
So like it's called now Unity of Fields. When it comes to like the online, is a lot of report backs, a graffiti account.
You gotta start somewhere.
Is there like a Kurdish solidarity movement there?
One of the earliest like political things I read was by Öcalan. Of all people, like I read it was like a little tiny blue pamphlet I got for free or something. Democratic Society, probably a section from that like introduction. The politics are interesting, but it is like it's not anarchism, and it's not anarchistic enough for me even back then. So I was like, oh, this is cool, but it's like not my thing. And I recognized it as being like a movement of indigenous peoples asserting themselves, landless peoples asserting themselves in the states that don't even respect them as human beings, let alone as non-citizen. I've always found it like really interesting, and I've always seen it as like a parallel struggle. Here, the Kurdish nationalist movement is like kind of influenced by that. Obviously, like the younger people are really, really keen on it. There was a lot of British volunteers, notably a lot of anarchists went out to Syria and fought for the SDF or the SDF or the YBS or YPJ, YPG. Or the anarchist formation, the TQILA. So many acronyms.
I know.
It's exhausting. It really is. The first British citizen to die in the Syrian civil war was a anarchist from the UK called Anna Campbell. She fought with YPJ and she was killed by a Turkish airstrike. I find it incredibly important parallel struggle. But specifically the politics that I find a lot of Kurdish nationalists here are influenced by isn't just democratic federalism. A lot of them are MLs. Obviously, the PKK's legacy is Marxist-Leninism. And it's after Abdullah Öcalan's arrest, the parties received like information that kind of influenced them towards a less like, ML-focused politics. But it is like very inspiring, and it's heavily criminalized here as well. Just like the Palestinian liberation movement, the Kurdish liberation movement here as terrorists, although the SDF work with NATO. So it is quite weird. British troops have fought alongside the SDF, people go out there to fight for them and come back, they go to prison for terrorism.
Yeah.
So it's pretty weird.
Project 2025, the proposal in it is to like fully back Turkey, stop working with the SDF, and use Turkey as the, like, because I mean, we're only reason we don't classify them as terrorists is because of war on quote unquote terror. We classify them as terrorists even though we want to. We probably shouldn't be working with them.
There's an old Kurdish saying, no friends but the mountains. International powers will use them as like by proxies in conflicts and then abandon them once the utility's over. Just like after the first Iraq War and the Gulf War and the war between Iraq and Iran, and right now the war in Syria that's ongoing, one of these forever wars, time and time again, tale as old as time.
What advice would you have to newer folks to like radical movements or revolutionary spaces? What's kind of been on your mind that you think would be useful for newer people wanting to do radical or revolutionary work?
Because a lot of your audience is the US, I might have a different like specific name context for what you're looking to get involved in. But I think the Anarchist Black Cross is an amazing like starting point for a lot of people who are newer or more nervous to do stuff. Because you can do the ABC prisoner support stuff from home. You just need a pen, a stamp, and some paper, and a computer, and you can support someone on the inside who is going through all kinds of hell in the prison network, and you can create these new relationships that not only protect someone on the inside, but inform you on the outside and teach you about the struggle inside prisons, the struggle outside of prisons, like right into political prisoners. Huge inspiration. Like some of the best things I've ever learned have come in letters from prison. And while I don't want to create this false category of like political prisoners who are somehow way more knowledgeable than everybody else, but it's people who have felt the plexiglass of a riot shield, people who have felt the truncheon over their head. They know what oppression is like, what real struggle is like, and they can tell you if they feel up for it. Like the Anarchist Black Cross, an amazing starting point. Even then, if you live in the middle of nowhere, like I've done most of my life, and you want to start a network, like the ABC is a great thing to just start and be like, anyone want to write letters to prisoners in your local group chat? People will be like, oh, yeah, I'll do it. And it's real work. And I'm not using this word in the positive sense, it's real like support, but it also rejects prison society, rejects the stratification of prisoners into a different category of people, and reaffirms ourselves as agents for our own autonomy rather than relying on NGOs, past prison legislation or whatever. The Anarchist Black Cross, an amazing starting point.
I love that answer because a lot of what we were talking about earlier around like how to sustain militancy. I mean, one thing I think is like always being able to be like, no matter what happens, people will have your back. Yeah. And since that is above ground, it should be the most like fuck party work. We need this. Like this is the work and like the reproductive labor that sustains autonomous communities.
100%. Like I've had people like tell me in letters like it hugely improves their like mental health and the quality of life, and the prison authorities hate it, which is really funny. I've had like letters returned, prisoners' inboxes full type stuff, and it's like great. One more thing I probably should plug: Sedition Selective. It's very much trying to create anarchist resources that last longer than just someone who has money. Printing, as we all know, we've all printed stuff, costs money, and you have to go to a company to do it. Created is like we've got a business license and we have a legal entity that we use to like avoid paying for taxes. And anarchist groups can be like, oh, I want 1,000 pamphlets, and they can pay just the cost of manufacture rather than the cost plus profit. We've also got like storage, we do facilitation, we do fundraising, and it's all outside of the sort of like NGO corporate thing. It's just a bunch of anarchists running. A lot of us are like, at least in a secondary sense, we're like printmakers. We do like our own screen printing, we do wood burning. That skill is a transferable skill. So it's like
talk to you about wood burning because we want to like dugouts.
Yeah, that's the hard bit. Oh, you want to actually make real dugouts, like as in the baseball?
No. Like for me, the one hitters.
One hitters. Wait, maybe this is a linguistic thing. I only know the term dugout.
We call them dugouts here, like the one hitters that can hold some of the herb too, and
then you can put it. It's like a wood device.
Like that's actually the reason we called this podcast.
I think you like baseball,
but also it's mainly the dugout. But it's also it's like an old head Black American thing to call it the dugout. A lot of people here don't call it that either, so we want to bring it back.
What we do for a lot of groups here is we will stock something, charge £0 for it, and people can donate on an honor system. So people can like, oh, I want a zine. I can either pay 0 or I can pay 10 pence or £1 or £100.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Dugout. Catch us over on Patreon to support the work. Catch us over on Instagram. Links in the description. And we'll see you all around. Stay safe, stay dangerous.